Monsieur le Président, avant de commencer, j'aimerais dire que nous sommes de tout cœur avec les gens d'Utrecht et des Pays-Bas qui sont bouleversés par la nouvelle d'une fusillade survenue dans un tramway. Ça vient tout juste d'arriver, mais on sait qu'il y a des morts et des blessés. La police envisage la possibilité qu'il s'agisse d'une attaque terroriste. We stand with our Dutch friends as they grapple with the consequences of this violence. We will be reaching out to our counterparts to offer our unwavering support. Prime Minister Rutte addressed this House mere months ago, and he spoke of the close ties between our countries. Canada will be there, as we always are, for the Netherlands in the difficult days ahead. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to express Canada's deepest condolences to all those grieving in New Zealand. Just a few days ago, our friend and ally suffered the worst terrorist attack in their history. An attack motivated by Islamophobia. 50 men, women, and children murdered at prayer. Dozens more injured. Gunned down by a monster, a terrorist, a coward. Je me suis entretenu avec la Première ministre Ardern. Je lui ai offert nos plus sincères condoléances et notre appui. Je l'ai également félicité pour le leadership et la compassion dont elle fait preuve depuis cette tragédie. Nous partageons la douleur des parents, des frères, des sœurs et des amis des victimes qui n'ont pas eu la chance de dire au revoir à leurs proches. Ces proches tués par une personne haineuse qui a décidé d'adopter une idéologie haineuse. Mr. Speaker, Canada is home to over 1 million Muslims who live and thrive in a free and open secular democracy. It is our responsibility to maintain this freedom so that those who choose to practice faith can do so without fear of violence. To our Muslim friends here in Canada, in New Zealand, and around the world, know that we mourn with you. We feel your pain, and we love you. We will stand by you in the difficult days and weeks to come. The Quran tells us, "The true servants of the Most Merciful are those who behave gently and with humility on earth, and whenever the foolish quarrel with them, they reply with words of peace." Now, if that idea sounds familiar, perhaps you've also heard it in the Gospel of Matthew, which speaks not of revenge and retaliation, but of turning the other cheek. Indeed, if we choose to look for them, the lessons found within our faiths will bind us together and are more powerful than those things that seek to divide us. Il y a à peine 2 ans, j'ai pris part à une vigile qui rendait hommage à 6 hommes innocents de Sainte-Foy à Québec. Des frères, des pères et des fils qui, comme les victimes de Christchurch, ont été tués par balles pendant qu'ils priaient. J'ai accompagné leurs familles dans leur deuil. Des familles qui avaient du mal à croire que leur communauté puisse être victime d'un tel geste. Monsieur le Président, nous avons trop souvent été témoins de tragédies comme celle survenue à Sainte-Foy et à Christchurch. Les innocents assassinés, des manchettes qui sonnent l'alarme alors que les pays sont plongés dans le chaos et dans la violence. Des grandes tueries. Des massacres qui ciblent les communautés religieuses. Des attentats terroristes. C'est une honte.
And it's a shame.
Et malheureusement,
unfortunately,
les dirigeants du monde
the world's
portent une
leaders
part de responsabilité.
share some of the
Une
responsibility.
responsabilité que nous ne pouvons pas
We have a
nier simplement en
responsibility
pointant les
to
autres
no
du doigt.
longer simply downplay
Parce que
these
de nos
incidents
jours,
by pointing
ceux
the
qui sont
finger
les
at
plus
others,
fâchés
because these days,
profitent d'une tribune
those who
plus
are
grande
angry
que
have
jamais.
ever more options
Toxic
for
rhetoric has broken into the
grandstanding.
mainstream. It's anti-Semitic, Islamophobic, anti-black, anti-indigenous, misogynistic, homophobic. The list goes on and on. This rhetoric is dangerous, hateful, and vile. It lives and festers online, spilling out into the real world with deadly consequences. We see it here in Canada, in online harassment, anonymous letters, defaced places of worship, acts of violence, and even murder. When we fail to denounce hatred with total conviction, we empower those people and legitimize their violence. Mr. Speaker, over the years, we've seen an increase in the number of terrorist attacks targeting Muslims all around the world. So families flee to democracies like Canada and the United States and our allies, praying that their new homes will give them safety, hoping that their kids will know a place where they are not targeted because of faith. But sadly, Mr. Speaker, these same families who fled violence in their homelands are now too often met by a new kind of violence when they reach new shores. Anti-immigrant hatred, right-wing extremism, white nationalism, neo-Nazi terrorism. These groups are alive in Canada, a nation that, under the leadership of Laurier and Diefenbaker and my father, has long championed the protection of minorities and promoted our diversity as our greatest strength. And yet, while the majority of our citizens welcome these newcomers with open arms, small, toxic segments peddle the belief that greater diversity is a weakness. The irony is that these fringe groups say they despise Daesh, Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, and others. But they spew hatred and incite violence and murder the innocent just the same. They are no better than those they claim to hate. Monsieur le Président, l'enjeu,
Mr. Speaker,
ce n'est
the
pas seulement
issue
que les
isn't
politiciens
just
ne dénoncent
politicians'
pas assez
failure
cette
to
haine.
condemn the
C'est
hatred.
que dans bien des cas,
The issue is that in
ils
many cases,
courtisent
they actually
ceux qui
condone
tiennent
those who
les
spread
propos haineux.
hateful messages.
J'aimerais dire
I'd
ceci aux
like to
politiciens
say
et aux leaders
to
du monde.
politicians and world
La
leaders,
politique tendancieuse,
popularism
la facilité avec laquelle certains
and
choisissent
the
de
way it's so
s'approprier
easy for some people
des
to
idées
take on
extrêmes,
extremist
il faut que
ideas.
ça arrête.
This has to stop.
C'est pas que des gens meurent,
It's not that people are
c'est que
dying.
des gens sont
It's
tués.
that people are being
Des
murdered.
mères et des pères,
Mothers and
arrachés à
fathers
leur famille,
have been snatched
des
from their
enfants
families.
innocents,
Innocent children,
insouciants, abattus en un
unaware,
instant, sans
have
une
been
once
struck
d'hésitation.
down in a moment without any
Mosques.
hesitation.
Temples, synagogues, churches, concerts, malls, schools, people murdered while vulnerable and defenseless here in Canada, south of the border, and around the world. And the response is always the same. We're aghast as the headlines blare and moms and dads hug their kids a little tighter, and thank God it's not happening to them. Politicians, well, we stand around, we offer our condolences, and we say nice things in the aftermath. We say that we'll do better. We'll say that never again will such hatred be allowed to fester unchallenged. And then when the flames die down and the smoke clears, we look the other way. We revert back to politicking, figuring out how we can tap into that powerful rage to harness a few more votes. We scapegoat the other to play to our base. With a wink and a nudge, we legitimize this evil. Mr. Speaker, I stand here today to cast a light on this hatred and on our unwillingness to call it out. As leaders, as privileged few with power and an audience, we have a responsibility to do something. This responsibility is not negotiable. It's not to be waived when it's politically convenient. Courting these views is always the wrong choice to make. We have to chase out this hatred from our parties, fight it online, denounce it at town halls, push back when it reaches our front door. Choosing to stay silent while hatred stews is complicity in its most cowardly form. Monsieur le Président,
Mr. Speaker, each and every year,
d'une décennie à l'autre,
each and every
on
decade,
pleure la perte
we
de
bemoan
ces
the
innocents-ci
loss
dans
of
ce pays-là.
innocent people
Et on
in
promet
this
de faire
country
mieux.
or that country,
Mais ensuite,
and we promise to
le
do better.
cycle se répète.
And after that, the cycle
Les leaders
simply
décident que
repeats
la haine est un
itself.
sentiment qu'ils
Leaders
peuvent
decide that
exploiter,
hatred is a feeling that
que
can
la
be
colère
tapped into,
insatiable
that
les
the
aidera à
insatiable
accéder au
anger
pouvoir.
of some will help them
En
reach
tant que
power.
société, en
As
tant
a
que communauté
society,
mondiale
as
et être
a
humain,
global community,
est-ce
and
qu'on a
as
vraiment
human
rien appris?
beings, have we
Pour
really
être
learned
honnête,
nothing?
je suis
To be
tanné de
honest, I'm
ça.
sick and tired of
Je suis
this.
tanné
I'm sick and
d'envoyer
tired
nos
of
pensées et
extending
nos
our
prières.
thoughts and our
Et
prayers.
si moi je suis tanné,
And if I'm sick and tired of
je
it,
peux à peine imaginer comment
I
doivent
can
se
barely
sentir ceux et
imagine
celles qui
how
sont
those
touchés
who
par
have
la
been
violence
directly affected by
à chaque
violence
jour.
every day must feel.
People around the world are exhausted by the carnage. They reach out to console friends and neighbors when these tragedies rock their communities, incensed by their leaders' inability to take a principled stand. People come out to vigils in the hundreds, in the thousands, and plead for action. And we fall short. Our communities set an example that our leaders consistently fail to follow. After tragedies like these, politicians often say that it's not a time to talk politics, but that instead we should grieve and support the affected communities. I think that's a farce, Mr. Speaker. I think this is exactly the time to talk politics. Because the best way to support people is to acknowledge that there's a problem and take concrete steps to fix it. Monsieur le Président,
Mr. Speaker,
en tant que communauté mondiale,
as an international
on doit faire un
community,
choix.
we have to make a choice.
est-ce qu'on va dénoncer nos
Are we going
leaders
to call
qui
out
ferment
our
les yeux devant
leaders
ceux qui
who look
incitent à la
away
violence?
when others
Est-ce qu'on va
incite
dénoncer nos
violence?
collègues de travail
Are we going to call
qui
out
racontent des blagues
our
racistes ou
colleagues at
misogynes
work who
sans
tell
que personne
racist or
ne dise rien?
misogynist jokes without anyone
Est-ce qu'on
saying
va dénoncer
anything?
les trolls
Are
sur
we going to
Internet,
call out
ces
internet
lâches
trolls,
qui
those
répandent la
cowards who
haine
spread
et qui
hatred
lancent des insultes sous le
and
couvert
insult
de
people
l'anonymat?
anonymously?
Ultimately, Mr. Speaker, will we do the right thing? Or will we bury our heads in the sand today, only to bury them in our hands later? The tragedy in New Zealand is, sadly, yet another example of just how far we've gone astray. But we cannot let the lessons of those 50 deaths go unlearned. The path we are going down is dangerous and unsustainable. And people are tired of fighting this alone without the full backing of their leaders. But we can take a stand here and now in Canada and around the world and say that enough is enough. That the days of spewing hatred and inciting violence without consequences are over. We owe it to the people of Christchurch. We owe it to the people of Sainte-Foy and of Pittsburgh and of Manchester. Mr. Speaker, we owe it to our kids, and we owe it to ourselves. I'm calling on like-minded countries of the world to stand with Canada in this fight. Muslim, Christian, Jewish, black, white, all of us, we must fight this hatred as a team that refuses to accept this as the new normal, a team tired of sending thoughts and prayers. Ici au Canada,
Here in Canada,
on a déjà pris des
we've
mesures
already
importantes
taken
pour lutter contre la
major steps
discrimination et la
to
haine.
fight discrimination and
On a
hatred.
intensifié les enquêtes
We've
visant les groupes
bolstered
de
our
propagande
investigation of
haineuse,
groups
y compris
responsible
les
for
groupes de
hate propaganda,
suprémacistes blancs et
including
néonazis.
white supremacist
On a
and
effectué des
neo-Nazi
réformes
groups.
importantes
We've
à
made
l'égard du
major
contrôle des armes à
changes
feu.
to
On a
arms
augmenté le
control.
financement pour
We've
assurer la
increased
protection des lieux
funding
de culte.
to protect places of
Et
worship.
on a investi dans des
We have
programmes qui
invested in
favorisent
programs to
l'inclusion,
promote
qui créent des
inclusion,
ponts entre
to
les gens
build bridges
et qui célèbrent
between people
notre
and
diversité.
celebrate our diversity.
Malgré tout,
In spite of
on est
everything,
conscient qu'il
we
reste
do
encore
know
beaucoup de
that there
travail
is
à
still a
faire.
lot of work to be done.
Mais comprenez-moi bien,
But
on va
understand
faire
me,
ce qui doit être fait.
we will do
Et
what
c'est un
needs doing.
message qu'on
This
va
is a
porter
message
sur la
that
scène
needs to
internationale.
be brought
To
to
our
the
partners around the
international
world.
community.
The fight against racism and intolerance will be a major fight. But we can't put it off any longer. I know that we can make real change here. We can turn the page and get off this dangerous path we're on. We need only look to our communities for inspiration. Mr. Speaker, there are more good people than bad in this world. The light outweighs the dark. The good greatly outnumbers the evil. We see it when our citizens come together at vigils in the wake of tragedy. We see it when strangers link arms to protect places of worship. We see it in offers to walk with those who feel unsafe. We saw it in Sainte-Foy, and we're seeing it now in New Zealand. This is an important fight. And I'm calling on politicians of all stripes to follow the example set by the good people we serve and do the right thing. We must counter this hatred, and together we will.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I want to start off my remarks by adding my voice and all those in the opposition party, and join with the Prime Minister in offering our deepest condolences to the people of the Netherlands. As more information comes to light about this vicious attack, we certainly are with them in spirit. Canada, of course, has a long history of being a partner to the Netherlands, and to all our Dutch friends, both here in Canada and at home in Europe, we give you our every best wishes and deepest sympathies in the aftermath of this tragedy.
It's hard to describe the horror felt by
et par les
us
Canadiens et les
all
Canadiennes quand nous avons appris la brutale
and
attaque
Canadians
terroriste
when we
ciblant la
learned
communauté
of
musulmane
the
en Nouvelle-Zélande
terrorist attacks
par un
against
suprématiste
Muslims
blanc.
in New Zealand by a white
It is difficult to
supremacist.
describe the horror felt by all of us in this place and by Canadians upon hearing of the brutal terrorist attack targeted at New Zealand's Muslim community by an avowed white supremacist. Nothing we say today will heal the pain caused by this hate-filled, anti-Muslim, deranged individual. But what we say today, and what we say tomorrow, and the day after that, has the power to stop others from experiencing the same pain in the future. Of course, we offer our most heartfelt condolences, and we stand in solidarity with the victims and their families, with the people of New Zealand, with the Muslim community all over the world, and with all those who feel vulnerable and targeted because of this despicable act of terror. Nous offrons nos plus sincères
We extend
condoléances
our
et
sincerest
sommes solidaires
condolences, and
avec
we
les
stand in
victimes et
solidarity
leurs familles,
with the victims and their
avec la
families,
population de la
and with the
Nouvelle-Zélande,
people of New Zealand,
avec la communauté musulmane
with the
dans le
Muslim
monde
community,
entier, et
all
avec
around
tous
the
ceux et
world,
celles qui se
and
sentent
with all
vulnérables
those who
et
feel
ciblés
vulnerable
à
and
cause de cet
targeted
acte de
because
terrorisme
of this
ignoble.
this ignorant attack, a terrorist attack.
Mothers and fathers had to explain to their children what happened and had to assure them that the same thing wouldn't happen to them the next time they go to the mosque to worship and pray. These conversations should never have to happen, not here in Canada, not anywhere. Evil is real, Mr. Speaker, and it takes many forms. Bigotry, hatred, racism, and violence are among them. These forces must be met with both our finest virtue and our fiercest resolve. Hatred must be met with truth, cowardice with courage, bigotry with tolerance, and violence with justice. The word terrorism has been used to describe random, indiscriminate acts of violence intended to inspire fear in others. And while that was certainly the intention of Friday's attacks, in many ways, they were the exact opposite of random. 50 victims, all of them loved, all of them brave, all of them heroes, and all of them Muslim. 50 victimes, des gens aimés et braves,
50
des
victims,
héros,
victims who were
les musulmans.
loved, who were brave. They were all Muslims.
14-year-old Syed Milne wanted to be a footballer when he grew up. His father said, "I remember him as my baby, who I nearly lost when he was born, a brave little soldier. It's so hard to see him just gunned down by someone who didn't care about anyone or anything." Abdul Aziz didn't hide when the gunman approached. He fought back to defend other worshippers, initially with only a credit card reader, and then subsequently chasing after him with a gun the shooter had emptied and dropped. What bravery in the face of such horror. Mr. Aziz survived. Others, like Naheem Rashid, who also fought back, did not. Ce sont quelques noms que nous devrions connaître
These
et ne
are
pas
few
oublier.
names that we need to know and never forget.
As leaders, we must be as forceful in our words as we are in our example. We must seize opportunities to ensure that Muslims and all others of all faith communities feel secure to live and practice their faith, both inside houses of worship and outside of them. Ce malheureux événement ravive des souvenirs de la terrible attaque survenue à la mosquée Québec
The terrible
dans
attack
des
in the
circonstances
Quebec City
similaires.
Mosque
Des
under
gens
similar
venus prier,
circumstances.
se
People had come
recueillir
to
et
pray.
dont la vie a
They'd
été
come
fauchée
together,
par la haine.
and their lives were
La
cut down by
douleur
hate.
est encore vive chez les proches des
The
victimes
pain
et nos
is
pensées
still
vont toujours
felt
les accompagner.
by all relatives of
Nous
those who
devons
were struck
condamner
down.
sans équivoque,
We need to
sans
unequivocally
équivoque, toutes les
condemn
doctrines de supériorité raciale ou des préjugés
all racist
d'exclusion ethnique
ideologies
ou religieuse.
or exclusive
We must be
ideologies.
unequivocal in our condemnation of all doctrines of racial superiority or exclusionary ethnic or religious prejudice. All of the great societies of human history have been founded on shared civic values, not on isolated ethnic nationalism. Canada has, from its inception, been a country built on values that transcend religious, ethnic, and linguistic divides. This is who we were founded to be. This is who we are. And this is who we will always be. Those who think otherwise have no place in our democracy. One need not look beyond the last few days to see evidence of this. Canadians have visited mosques, dropped off gifts, and otherwise taken steps to show their love and goodwill for their Muslim neighbors. I know many of my colleagues on all sides of the House, and I myself visited a mosque in my own riding this weekend. We have all paid similar visits in our own communities. These spontaneous outpourings from people everywhere shows us that Canadian pluralism is not in the first instance defined by politicians, but rather by the open hearts and helping hands of the Canadian people. I say to my colleagues in all parties, we certainly have our differences on important policy matters that deserve rigorous and spirited debate. But on this, the very compassion and humanity of our Canadian society, there can be no debate. Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, the words we say today are important, but words today are not enough. We must commit today to turn words into concrete action. Action to defend a concept of Canada rooted in shared civic values, respect for the principle of universal human dignity, and freedom of religion for all. We must fight terrorism. We must stand with our Muslim brothers and sisters, people of all faiths, people of all racial backgrounds. Monsieur le Président, les mots que nous
Mr. Speaker,
prononçons
the
aujourd'hui
words
sont
that we
importants,
say today
mais
are
les mots ne
important,
suffisent pas.
but words are not
Nous
enough.
devons nous engager aujourd'hui à
We must
transformer les
commit
mots en
to
mesures concrètes
transforming words into
pour
concrete
défendre le
action
concept d'un Canada
to stand
enraciné
up
dans des valeurs
for a
civiques
Canada
communes,
that is
le
rooted in
respect
common
du
civic
principe de la
values,
dignité humaine universelle
and respect for
et la
universal
liberté de
values
religion pour
and
tous.
freedom of religion for
Nous devons
all.
combattre le terrorisme
We must
et nous devons
combat
être aux côtés de
terrorism,
nos frères
and
et
we must
sœurs
stand up
musulmans,
with
des
our
gens de tous
Muslim
les foi,
brothers and
de
sisters
tous les
and our brothers and sisters
ethnicités.
of all faiths and
Conservatives are
ethnicities.
firmly committed to this effort. We will work hard to breathe new life into the immortal words of the great John Diefenbaker, spoken on this floor almost 60 years ago, when he said, quote, "I am Canadian, a free Canadian, free to speak without fear, free to worship God in my own way, free to stand for what I think right, free to oppose what I believe wrong, free to choose those who govern my country. This heritage of freedom I pledge to uphold for myself and all mankind." Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Burnaby South.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Au nom des néo-démocrates,
On
je veux
behalf
aussi
of all
montrer
New
notre
Democrats,
solidarité
I
pour
also
la communauté
want to express our
touchée par cet
solidarity with the
acte de
community
terrorisme.
affected by this
C'est
terrorist
clair,
act.
ce qui s'est
It is
passé
very clear
en Nouvelle-Zélande, c'était un
What
acte de
happened
terrorisme.
in New Zealand, and that it
We
was a
all, of
terrorist
course,
attack.
denounce this act of terrorism. We all denounce Islamophobia, which is at the heart of what happened in New Zealand. The fact that people, Muslims, brothers and sisters, loved ones, friends and family, going to a place of prayer, going to a place of reflection, a place where they sought to find some peace and respite from their were killed in cold blood. That attack reverberated across the world. Though it happened in Christchurch, New Zealand, the pain impacts all of us. It hurts here in Canada, where Muslim brothers and sisters, our friends, our close ones, people who work with us, are thinking about their own loved ones when they go to masjid, when they go to prayer, and how much it hurts to know that you're being targeted for being who you are. So of course we denounce Islamophobia today. Of course we denounce inflaming hatred against Muslims. But we have to go further than that. C'est clair qu'on dénonce la haine, c'est clair qu'on dénonce la discrimination, mais il faut aller plus loin de ça.
But we need to go beyond that.
We know that hate knows no bounds. Once hate is allowed to grow, it consumes all in its path. Hate is like a fire. Once allowed to grow, it spreads, consuming everything. And we've seen the impact of that hatred here in North America as well. African Americans attending a Baptist church in Texas were gunned down because of the color of their skin. 6 in Wisconsin were attacked while meditating at a gurdwara. Here in Canada, in Quebec, the city of Quebec, we saw the impact of Islamophobia. Anti-Semitism continues to impact people across the world. So it's not enough to just denounce Islamophobia, we also need to denounce all forms of hate. But to denounce hate is more than just calling out the acts. We've got to go further. We must learn to do things differently, and ask ourselves a question. What are we willing to do to tackle hatred? One of the things that we've seen that is the root of hatred is fear. When fear is inflamed, when fear is allowed to grow, it creates a climate for hate to grow. So we think about one of the earliest fears we all have is fear of the unknown. And that fear is very real. When someone doesn't know about someone else, when you don't know where they come from, when you don't know what their values are or who they are, there's often folks that'll use that unknown as they'll use that to create fear. And that fear can develop into hatred. We know that language and policies can also dehumanize our fellow human beings. And that dehumanization can result in fear that leads to hatred. So we need to call out language which specifically dehumanizes people. The language of calling someone illegal. It dehumanizes the worth and value of another human being. When we use words like barbaric to describe another human being. Again, the purpose is to dehumanize. And then once you dehumanize, it leads to fear and hatred. Also, when we refer to immigration as a threat, that again creates the climate for fear. And that climate for fear can be used to create hatred. We know that words can fuel white supremacy. Words can fuel hatred, and we've got to call out those words and call out those policies. But beyond all of that, we know there's another form, another way that fear is allowed to grow. And that's in the fear and worry that people, everyday Canadians, feel every day. There's far too many Canadians, far too many people living in our country that live in fear of the future. They're worried about whether or not their job will pay enough to build a life for themselves and their family. Far too many Canadians are worried about if they can pay their bills, if they can find a place to live. They're uncertain about their own future. Imagine how fearful they are for the future for their kids. There's some folks that will use that fear, that uncertainty, and use it to create divisions, to pit one group against another, to divide us. That fear that is created can then be used to create hatred. So, il faut avoir le courage d'aller de l'avant. Il faut avoir le courage de prendre des mesures, des actions différemment pour créer un changement dans la société.
To bring about change in society.
So let's have the courage to call out, not just call out the language, let's go further. First off, we know right now our Muslim brothers and sisters are hurting, so I ask everyone to reach out to your friends. Reach out to the people you know. Ask them if they're all right, because people are hurting right now. But beyond that, let's reach out to people that we don't know about. Let's open our hearts and replace the ignorance, the lack of knowledge with understanding, which will create the climate for compassion, so we care for one another. Let's not only call out policies and words, but let's replace those words and policies with policies that unite us, that bring us together. Let's be conscious of the words we use so that we never create any ground for hate to grow. And let's unrig the system. When I talked about the system that creates this fear and worry for the future when people can't find a good job, it's a system that's been rigged to ensure that more and more wealth is concentrated in the hands of fewer and fewer. A system that frustrates everyday people who work harder and harder and can't get ahead. Let's unrig that system so that everyone can realize their dream, so that everyone can see their own potentials realized and actualized. Let's build a system of shared prosperity. Prosperity for the many, not the few. A system where everyone can achieve what they want. If we want to tackle hate, we've got to go far more. We've got to go further than just tackling Islamophobia. We've got to go further than just tackling anti-Semitism. We have to tackle all forms of hate, whether it's based on gender, whether it's based on identity, whether it's based on ethnicity, whether it's based on your immigration status, whatever it is, we must denounce all forms of hatred, and we must remove all the conditions that create fear, all the conditions that allow for fear to grow, for hatred to take hold. That's what we need to do. We want to pay true tribute to those who've lost their lives, and that's what we can do to build not only a better Canada, but a better world. Thank you.
L'honorable député de la Pointe-de-L'Île, est-ce qu'elle a la consommation unanime de la Chambre afin d'ajouter ses
requested
commentaires?
unanimous consent to be able to
D'accord.
give remarks. Does he have consent?
Monsieur le
Yes.
Président, tout d'abord, je joins ma voix
Mr.
à celle
Speaker,
des autres
first I
partis
would like to
pour exprimer notre
join with
solidarité
the
envers le
other
peuple de
parties in
Nouvelle-Zélande dans
expressing our
cette terrible
solidarity with the
épreuve
people
auquel
of
ils
New
font face
Zealand
aujourd'hui.
during this very difficult time.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. Speaker,
vendredi dernier, le
last
monde
Friday,
entier,
the
encore une
entire
fois,
world,
encore une autre
once
fois,
again,
a été
was
foudroyé
struck
par la
by
haine lorsqu'un
hate.
terroriste
When a
a arraché la
terrorist
vie à
murdered
50 personnes
50
innocentes à Christchurch, en Nouvelle-Zélande.
individuals in
50
Christchurch, New
personnes ont
Zealand.
été
50
tuées
individuals were
tout
killed
simplement parce qu'elles ont voulu, en ce
simply
vendredi,
because they
pratiquer
wanted
leur
on that
religion
Friday
en
to
toute
practice
quiétude.
their religion in
Au nom
peace.
du Bloc québécois,
On
je tiens à
behalf of
offrir
the
mes
Bloc
plus sincères
Québécois, I would like to
condoléances
offer my
aux proches des
sincere
victimes, aux
condolences to
citoyens
the
et aux
relatives of
citoyennes
those
de
victims,
Christchurch
to the
et à
citizens of
toutes les personnes
Christchurch,
de
and to
confession
all
musulmane.
those
Là-bas comme ici, ils
individuals
se sentent
of the Muslim
aujourd'hui
faith,
moins en
there
sécurité
and here,
qu'hier.
all those people who
Je tiens à
today
leur
feel
offrir
less
tous
safe
nos
than they
vœux de
felt
courage
yesterday.
à travers
I
cette
would like to
épreuve.
wish them all courage
Je
during
tiens
this
à
very
leur dire
difficult
que
time.
nous sommes
I
avec
would
eux,
like to tell them
que notre voix
that
se
we are
joint à
with
celle du
them,
monde
that
entier
our
pour leur
voices
dire
with those
que nous
voices
sommes
around the world,
solidaires et
to
pour
tell
leur
them
dire
that
que
we stand
l'humanité
with them in
triomphera sur
solidarity, to tell
l'horreur
them
sur
that
l'inhumain.
humanity will
Je
triumph
tiens à leur
over
dire que dans leur
horror, over the
peine,
inhumane.
ils constateront que leur
I want to tell them
communauté est
that in their
faite
pain,
plus
they
qu'ils ne
will
l'auraient
see
cru
that their
de héros
community
comme Abdul Aziz,
is made up
prêts
more
à
than they could
tout
ever have
pour
imagined
donner,
of
à tout
heroes
donner pour
like
ses
Abdul
concitoyens.
Aziz, people
Et
willing to do
qu'ensemble,
everything
ils
for their
trouveront la
fellow
force
citizens.
d'affronter
I want to tell
chaque
them
jour,
that
chaque
together
nouveau
they
jour.
will find the strength to
Monsieur le
face
Président,
each day.
la tragédie de
Mr.
Christchurch nous
Speaker,
démontre
the
qu'il faut
Christchurch
rappeler,
tragedy
répéter
shows
et
us that we
insister
need
que
to
la haine
recall,
envers les
repeat, and
musulmans
emphasize that
est
hate
inacceptable
for
et doit
Muslims
être
is
dénoncée
unacceptable
à chaque
and must
occasion.
be called out
Il
at
faut
every
dénoncer chaque
opportunity.
parole avant qu'elle ne
We
contamine le
must
climat
recall
ambiant.
that every
Avant que ce
individual is
climat ne
allowed
se
to practice
transforme
the
en
religion of
geste
their
et
choice
que
if
le
they so
geste ne
choose to do
devienne
that.
irrécupérable.
That every individual should be
Avant
able
que
to do
le
that
geste
without
posé
fearing
par
for
un
their
meurtrier de
safety.
Sainte-Foy devienne une inscription sur le
We
fusil
must
d'un
recall
terroriste en
all of
Nouvelle-Zélande,
these
à l'autre
before
bout du monde.
these acts
C'est
become an
une
engraving
responsabilité
on
qui
a
nous
rifle.
incombe et que nous
This is a
devons
responsibility
saisir
that we
en
all
mémoire de
share
tous ceux
and that,
et toutes
that
celles
we
qui ont
must
perdu la
seize
vie à
on
Christchurch.
behalf of all those
Il faut
who lost
rappeler
their
que
lives
chaque
in
personne peut
Christchurch.
choisir de
We
pratiquer la
have to
religion de
recall
son choix
that everyone
si elle le souhaite.
should be able to practice the
Que si elle le
religion of their
souhaite, que
choice
chaque
if
personne
they
doit
so
pouvoir
wish.
le faire
That each
sans
individual
crainte pour
should
sa
be able to do
sécurité
that
en
without
toute
fearing
liberté.
for their safety.
C'est un des piliers de
That
notre
is one of the
société,
pillars of
de notre
our
État de droit.
society,
C'est une des
of the
libertés les
rule of
plus
law.
fondamentales du
It is
monde
one of the most
occidental,
fundamental freedoms
une
of the Western
liberté
world, a
qu'il faut
freedom
défendre à tout prix.
that must be
Il faut rappeler
defended.
cette liberté
We
qui
must
nous unit
recall
et
this freedom
conséquemment
that unites
dénoncer
us,
sans relâche
and
les
we
discours
must
haineux qui nous
condemn
divisent.
any
Il faut les
hateful
dénoncer
speech that divides
avant que
us.
ces discours ne
We
prennent
must condemn
racine.
this
Il
before
faut
this hate
dénoncer
speech
sans
takes
relâche
root.
les
We
théories du
must
complot
condemn this
qui
hate
viennent
speech,
obscurcir
and we
le
must
jugement
condemn any
des esprits faibles.
conspiracy theories that cloud the
C'est une
judgment of those
responsabilité qui
who
nous
lack
incombe
good
à tous,
judgment.
que nous devons saisir en mémoire de tous ceux et toutes celles qui
We
ont
must
perdu
do this on
leur vie
behalf of
à
all those
Christchurch,
who lost
mais
their
aussi à
lives in
Sainte-Foy,
Christchurch.
à la Polytechnique,
Also on behalf
à
of all
Paris,
those who lost their
à
lives in
Nice,
Sainte-Foy,
à
the
Charlottetown, à
Polytechnique, Paris,
Pittsburgh,
Nice,
en
Charleston,
Norvège
Pittsburgh,
et partout
Norway,
où la haine
and
l'a
everywhere
momentanément
where
emporté
hate
sur
momentarily
l'humanité.
triumphed
Merci.
over humanity. Thank you.
Does the honourable member for Saanich Gulf Islands have unanimous consent to add her comments? The honourable member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thanks to my colleagues in this place. I, like all of you, share in the deep grief of the people of New Zealand, particularly the Islamic population of New Zealand, the neighbors, the friends, the worshippers. This is a horrific act of violence. And I appreciate so much that the Prime Minister has shown a light on the fact, and it's a fact, that there are white supremacists in Canada who harbor the same kinds of views as the perpetrator of this act of atrocity. Those are hard words to say because Canadians are so very nice. We really are. Just over the 2 weeks that we had, Mr. Speaker, I was in community after community and town hall meetings, and there's no question. Canadians are, as a people, a family. We may want to create divisions, region against region, but they're not real. Canadians are inherently really wonderful, loving, compassionate human beings, and that we would have such a thing as white supremacy anywhere in Canada should be as deeply disturbing to all of us here, to everyone across the country. To turn to New Zealand for a moment, it doesn't fail to strike me with such deep irony that the people of Christchurch were visited another act, a natural disaster, that cut right to the heart of that community. The earthquake of 2011 killed 185 people. And I'm not speaking for New Zealanders, but given the commentary from people who were near the shooting, who were impacted by the shooting, I don't doubt that my friend James Shaw, who's a parliamentarian in New Zealand and co-leader of their Green Party, would think I was right in saying that this act of violence has been more deeply painful to the people of Christchurch than even the earthquake that obliterated centuries of monuments and killed so very many. That brave, young woman, Prime Minister of New Zealand, has all of our support, and I so appreciate that the Prime Minister spoke to her directly. But Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has already proven herself to be a strong woman in politics by being the first Prime Minister anywhere in the world to give birth while in office. But this should never have come on her watch. It's so unfair. And her words in the moments after the killings, quote, speaking of the victims in the mosque, she said, "They are us. The person who has perpetrated this violence against us is not." She has completely excluded them from having any right to feel that they belong in New Zealand, anyone who would do such a thing. We must do the same in Canada. We must be prepared to say, if you're attracted to a white supremacist movement, you don't belong in Canada. You are not us. If you're attracted to a rally where you see signs that suggest there's white supremacists in the group, don't show up. Don't speak there. Give no oxygen, even accidental oxygen. All of us in political life must give no oxygen to hatred, to violence, to anti-Semitism, misogyny, Islamophobia. We must stand together as Canadians and know that the people we represent call on us to be our best selves, to love one another, to love our neighbors, and to be the kind of people who will stand outside a mosque with the sign that says, "I'm a Christian, but I'm here while you worship. I've got your back. I'm watching for you. I'm a Jew, but I'm standing here outside your mosque, as you will stand outside my temple, as we will stand together in places secular and religious, in faith, as family." No hatred must be allowed to take root in this country. We stand with the people of New Zealand, say, God bless you through what you're going through. Assalamu alaikum. We are together as family on this planet. Let no hatred take root here.
Allow me to thank the Right Honourable Prime Minister, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, the Honourable Member for Burnaby South, l'honorable député de la Pointe-Lille, l'honorable député de Saanich Gulf Islands, pour leurs propos tellement éloquents.
For their very eloquent words.
Suite aux discussions entre les représentants de tous les
Following
partis à la Chambre, je crois
discussions among the
qu'on
parties,
il y a consentement
I
pour
believe
observer un
there
moment
would
de
be
silence en
unanimous
mémoire des
consent to
victimes de
observe a
l'attentat contre les
moment of
mosquées de
silence
Christchurch,
for the victims of the
Nouvelle-Zélande.
Christchurch
J'invite les honorables
attack.
députés à se lever.
Will honourable members please rise?